Good stuff. So before we get into the topic of today's video, I thought I'd address the multitude of comments I got in yesterday's video when I indicated I felt that the Labour Party was anti-Semitic or had a problem with anti-Semitism, along with a subsequent Twitter thread that ended up with me muting the person on it. You know who you are? I gave you an out. You ignored it. A number of the comments indicated that the writer of the article, Margaret Hodge, was a bad person, and therefore what she says shouldn't be taken as true. And I tend to agree that possibly some of the things she has done in the past are quite questionable. I agree. However, if you bothered to go through all the sources I put down there, you would notice that I put quite a number of sources that verified the claims. Therefore, the character assassination was utterly invalid and just served to show how weak you truly are, almost intellectually bankrupt at that point. This would also apply to the person on Twitter who did the very same thing, along with a multitude of false equivalences. I gave you an out. Next time, take it. Because honestly, I am not going to argue with you on Twitter, on YouTube, anywhere. I'm going to get sexual with you. And also, stop telling me I'm on the right. Stop it. It is getting annoying now. There is only so much Jägermeister I can drink in one sitting of a recording before I start to pull my tentacles out. And as I'm unwilling to put the new Doctor's sonic screwdriver in my hand, which is essentially a fucking dildo in the first place, I'd like to keep the other sexual related things on my face there instead. Right, so now that I've gotten that political foray off my chest, which I think I've learnt my lesson, I'm just not going to bother wasting my time. I'll just let people continue down that particular path, because it's quite frankly getting quite embarrassing. We are instead going to talk about injustice. Again, it's one of those things that keeps cropping up, and as I promised, I will persist in bringing it to your attention. We have two instances, and I will let you decide what you think their fate should be. In fact, I'm going to present them to you, and then you can decide the ISO cube sentence for them. I should probably change my outfit for this. A schizophrenic Melbourne woman who slashed her baby's throat out of fear the world was ending will walk free after completing treatment in a mental health facility. The woman, who cannot be named for legal reasons, was sentenced to a 30-month community corrections order in the Supreme Court of Victoria after pleading guilty to infanticide. The court was told the 13-month-old baby died on June 5th last year while the woman was in the midst of a postpartum episode at her suburban reservoir home. Not to poke too many holes in this already, but if she was already schizophrenic and she had a baby, surely there should have been someone spending an inordinate amount of time around her because of her already noticed condition, unless of course it was a case that she was diagnosed with it afterwards, as a way of scapegoating the ridiculous mental breakdown that accompanied the PPD, is it called normally? PPE? Postpartum depression? I think that's what it's called. Maybe I'm the only person that thinks that. And I'm not trying to denigrate what happens to people after birth, because I know this does happen to a lot of people, but I'm very interested to know when the schizophrenia was diagnosed. Because if it was after, it sounds almost like a scapegoat at that point. Now with this particular case, I get that because of the PPD there is a mitigating factor, but I would still argue murder is murder, and regardless of circumstance, a custodial sentence should be applied. The woman believed many people would turn into animals, so she had to protect her daughter by killing her. That's a very peculiar way of protecting a life. I'm going to save you by ending you. That's the almost opposite of a superhero. The court was previously told the woman spent at least 6 stints in a psychiatric inpatient in the lead up to the killing, but was discharged 11 days before the death. During the sentencing, Justice Paul Coughlin said the woman who had come to Australia as a refugee suffered from delusional beliefs. Well, she did believe her husband was the devil and that he had hexed her, so, With ongoing schizophrenia and suffering from a postpartum episode at the time of the infanticide, he added she was under the stress of raising a young family in the context of socio-economic adversity. Oh, a further scapegoat. Fantastic. The woman had been reluctant to take her medication in the past, so she chose not to do something that would help her. But it's okay, because she, because of that, made the decision to help someone else that she supposedly loved by taking the life away from her. That's logic, everyone. Am I supposed to be holding up a sarcasm sign for this? You know, we're done with this one. Tell me below what you think her sentence should have been. I will link the article, of course, as well. So now we're going to skip from the convict nation and come all the way back to the United Kingdom, where a young mother, aged 21, who took a 13-year-old schoolboy's virginity on her kitchen floor, avoided jail after the judge warns her not to invite teenage lads around for parties. Okay, there's already a mistake in this article. It's called statutory rape. He is not of legal age. Mould Crown Court heard Jordan Lightfoot, this woman in fact. Yep, she looks like a young mum to me. Had sex with the schoolboy, raped, who was a virgin, shocker, on the kitchen floor at her home in North Wales in 2016. She denies 3 charges of sexual activity, and also sexual activity by touching with a boy of 15, so statutory rape again, and causing or inciting the elder boy to engage in sexual activity. And I know someone's going to say, she's 21, he's 15, it's almost okay. No, it's not, but was found guilty earlier this month. The court heard the younger boy's shocked mother contacted police after reading text messages on his mobile phone. Yesterday, Judge David Hale imposed an 18-month jail sentence suspended for 2 years with 50 days of rehabilitation activity. Do you know what she should have gotten? 18-month jail sentence, not suspended, and put on the sex offenders register. What? Are the consequences a bit too much here? The law says one thing. You have done the other thing, the illegal thing. There is no exception to this. You commit a crime, you then receive the punishment. I'm assuming because she's a young mother, this is why she's not in prison. This is why she's not on the sex offenders register. She was also given a sexual harm prevention order, and to give a bit of context of what it is, I have linked it below, but I'm also going to read a passage from it. The only prohibitions that can be imposed by an SHPO are those which are necessary for the purpose of protecting the public from sexual harm from the defendant. These can, however, be wide-ranging. An order may, for example, prohibit someone from undertaking certain forms of employment such as acting as a home tutor to children. It may also prohibit the offender from engaging in particular activities on the internet. The decision of the Court of Appeal reinforces the need for the terms of an SHPO to be tailored to the exact requirements of the case. SHPOs may also be used to limit and manage internet use by an offender, where it is considered proportionate and necessary to do so. The behaviour prohibited by the order might be well considered unproblematic if exhibited by another member of the public. It is the offender's previous offending behaviour and the subsequent demonstration that they may pose a risk of further such behaviour which will make them eligible for an order. All in all, this sounds like a very fancy way of saying ASBO. Now, this particular sexual harm prevention order has been given to her for 5 years, and it bans her from having contact with boys between the age of 11 and 16, unless inadvertent or with consent of parents who know about the conviction. It's a very protected way of giving her an out. Interesting. I'd still stick her in prison though. Oh, and to add to this, because I didn't notice it at first, Lightfoot was also put on the sex offenders register for 10 years and must pay £140 costs. Small victory, I guess. The sex offender register is exactly where she belongs. Am I right? Although I would argue that she should have been treated as someone who had committed statutory rape, and therefore tried under the more severe crime and summarily punished. When passing sentence, Judge Hale said it happened during a troubled period of her life, living on her own. You became involved with a group of lads, people who were prepared to befriend you, and you who were prepared to befriend them. On these 2 occasions you engaged in a brief sexual relationship with both of them. There is a disparity of age. They were vulnerable because they were even less equipped than you to deal with the emotional relationships involved. I accept you were immature. Can you do me a favour, Judge Hale? Tell me what age it is acceptable then to try a woman who has raped a minor and not use the immature as a scapegoat. I am rather intrigued on this one, and I doubt you'd give any answer ever, to be honest. But again, I put this to you, the audience. What do you believe her sentence should have been? I personally believe she should have served 18 months in prison. And yes, the sex offender register, yeah, that's fine, I agree to that. Anyway, I hope everyone has a lovely Wednesday, and thank you all for listening.
Oh, goddowns.
In your arse.
Imagine my shock.